Yeah.
So it just makes sense. Obviously, I have some sciencey stuff and some big words I can contribute to the conversation. You have an actual experience that
Big
you can talk
words.
about.
You giving big words?
Yeah,
No,
like
you've
and
never
but and
experienced that.
it.
Exactly. Those are big words. Big words.
Oh my God, British humor. It's great fun.
Mm.
Yeah, so education, school systems, educational systems, learning in general is a big topic, obviously, in my field of research. I'm interested. And you've got a couple of kids. I don't have kids. And they're going through an experience that everyone goes through, but it's sort of different. And the way the school system is now, it's changing. Let's put it that way.
It is definitely changing. It is. I think changing is that word
I mean, I
that I
would
would
say in
use.
the UK, the school system is struggling. Lack of teachers, increase in
Yeah.
students, lack of school facilities for everyone. So
Yeah.
everyone is struggling.
Yeah. It is. It's obvious from a parent's, well, I don't know whether it's obvious from other parents' perspectives, but it is from mine. Because it's got harder. So both of my children are diagnosed autistic, just for context. And so they have needs that need to be met, basically, to put it really simply. And unfortunately, it's incredibly hard, if not impossible, to meet the needs of neurotypical kids, let alone neurodiverse kids, autistic kids. And that is starting to really show as we are. So my kids are coming up to move into secondary education. I don't know what that is in America. Eh, figure it out.
Grade
It
something.
they're moving between like the initial
12 years
education.
old, isn't it?
Yeah, around that. They are quite young for their age. Because they're born in like June time, so they're quite young. So they're only 10, 11.
Fourth quarter.
Um,
Relative age effect is against them.
Pretty much. And so one of the things that we've been doing for a while is trying to make sure that my two get the support they need. Now, there are options if they don't. One of them is home education, which, oh, help me if I can avoid, I would, because it's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not. I mean, being a
And
teacher, as difficult as it is, being a teacher and a parent and trying to run that line, whew, I mean,
running both of those lines is really hard. We had to do it during COVID. And although I am very much excited about learning and education, I would not want to be in full control of their education because that's really complicated, especially as their parent as well. So having people who are dedicated to help them with their learning is great. Um,
I
whatever
was going
that
to say
actually
it's
means.
it's not necessarily it's difficult, but it certainly adds another stress that you don't necessarily need or want.
Yeah,
Because when you're trying to help someone else learn something, it's an extremely complicated process because that's learning. It's very complicated. And how do you get people to learn all of the different things that you potentially want them to learn, but expose them to everything with the least amount of bias as possible, giving them autonomy or enough autonomy
yeah,
to work themselves in an environment that they are very comfortable in because they're at home. So you're like, okay,
yeah,
how do I change this environment, adapt this environment? I mean, as a coach, sports coach, you're working with kids maybe 1, 2 hours max. I mean, if some sports you maybe like 4 or 5 hours, depending on the sport and the session, but coaches struggle with this. There's research on coaches that struggle with this. Teachers, sorry, teachers, but they suck at this because
yeah.
there's 30 plus kids in a room and they don't teach any of them.
And that is exactly my like, of course, with the slight bit of knowledge that I had an interesting discussion with a friend of mine who's like, oh, I don't believe you should have them in a specialist setting because it would be bad for them. They risk bullying. It's like when they get out into the outside world, they risk bullying. It was a very interesting perspective, very biased perspective, but it
Yes.
was a perspective. And I'm like, I get what you're trying to say, but no, because out from my experience of the schools that I have been in with my biased perspective, from the knowledge that I have around education and learning and our conversations and all the lovely stuff, a specialist setting, and my knowledge of my two children and their needs, a specialist setting is actually a really, really good option for them.
This links to something I was saying yesterday. So I was a guest on another podcast yesterday. Sorry, John, I was betraying you. But yeah, and they were asking me, they were asking me a couple of different questions, mainly around technology. But I, as I do, went a little bit sideways and started talking about philosophy and behavioral integrity.
You do that with everybody and not just me. Now I am upset.
Well, I didn't really get to go that far because
that's boring.
Yeah, their questions were quite shallow because they were fairly new to the concepts. But yeah, so I was talking about philosophy, people's morals and ethical values, and how that ties in with behavioral integrity. And one of my gripes with online education and content creation just in general is people don't reflect on their actual philosophy when it comes to the advice or the opinions that they share. And the example I can see in the corner of my eye. And the example you've just given me there is a perfect case study where someone has values, and when you ask them questions, they will say, "Oh, learning needs to be individualized. Everyone learns differently." Most people will agree with that. And I would imagine the person you were speaking to probably agrees with that as well, to some extent. Them saying, "Well, yeah, you can't teach one thing to every person in the same way. Everyone learns a bit different." They'll probably then say, "Oh, I'm a visual learner," or "I'm a kinesthetic learner," which is also wrong. But anyway, everyone has this interpretation. Most people anyway have this interpretation that we all learn slightly different. And a specialist school deliberately specifies how they teach for the learner. Yeah. So saying that a specialist school does the opposite of what they would want teachers to do in their own school is directly opposite of their values. They are saying something that goes directly against their philosophy of learning, which to me shows that the person, this is why, for me, I get frustrated at that comment, is they're making a baseless argument which doesn't help anyone.
With that conversation, it was a very emotionally driven argument. Yeah. And yes, emotions drive everything, obviously, but you could tell the bias was completely overtaking rationality in the conversation.
I would imagine they've had experience, either of one side or the other, of something that could have happened, and they are putting cause on it.
Yeah, and that was exactly what happened, because I kept going because I was interested and felt like probing. I'd do that. But going back to what you were saying, something that really, you were talking about content creators and the responsibility and the thing, that is something that I have been taking really seriously in my own work recently. Like, a lot of what I teach in my business is around starting from you and working from your set. It's all to do with the conversations we talk about here. Just trying to explain it in a way that is slightly more manageable. and
I've got a story to tell you in a minute.
I can't wait to hear the story. And then I think we were having a discussion around philosophy of practice. It was one of the episodes. And one of the things that I did do is to kind of come up with just to start thinking about my philosophy of practice. And then I'm like, am I living what I'm teaching? Am I actually working? And by living what I'm teaching, I mean, not doing it every single minute of every single second of every single day, because I'm human and fallible. But am I working in that area? Am I moving towards that? Am I continuing to stand with what I believe? And it was really interesting because I was like, oh, shit, no. And then from there is where I shifted to actually follow what I'm saying, which I think in business is not often done. People say these things and then it's not done, and they don't do it themselves. They just go and sell it or
put it literally out in templates. You're explaining the hook of the video I'm working on.
Don't have to watch now. No. But that there is the crux of, like, for me, what's been changing over the last couple of months, and especially with my kids and the transitions that we had that we explained last week, which is not on the podcast feed yet because it would not upload.
Not my problem.
I hate Anchor. Sorry, Spotify for podcasters. Anyway, so which you can watch on YouTube.
Yeah,
because I think that's the best way. Honestly, that's the best way to watch it because you see our facial expressions, and I think it's slightly better on podcast on YouTube. Also, let us know if you want us to just keep it on YouTube and not put it on a podcast platform. I don't have a problem with that because we are talking visually far more than we ever were when we first started. So in some ways, it seems a bit pointless. Do let us know. That's a side question.
Does that mean you'll be uploading the videos?
No.
Or are you just going to take it off of your plate and leave it on mine?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, okay.
You're very welcome. Well, I can still upload them. I just don't see why people. I don't know how many people are actually consuming it. Not many.
I don't know. I just know I get loads of comments on YouTube that I go through every Saturday when I upload the video. I'm like, I'm going to read through all of these. And I'm going to be honest to those listening and those watching. I read them, but some of the comments I have, I'm like, I can't write an essay about this and then write an essay about that and write an essay because then I just use my entire day responding to comments and moving on a conversation that is not going to go anywhere, but it's more like we're talking for the sake of talking rather than actually making action. So I'm like, yes, I agree, but I don't want to start this conversation right now. That's what's in my head.
I mean, we talk a lot. We talk about.
I just pulled my headphones out. I'll be back in a second. Carry on talking.
Danny's an asshole. Nobody likes Danny. It's fine. Everyone thinks he. Yeah. So as I was saying, really clearly, no.
That's twice I've done that now on
yeah, I know.
on calls. It's because I fidget so much, and because like the computer's there. For those that are listening, I've changed my setup a fair bit, and because it's there, like I have a wire, and I keep like pulling out, which is why I had it on my right side, because the right side obviously I got the boom arm and I can't move my arm as much, but I can't move the PC that side because of the radiator behind it. So I'm like, I'm out there. There you go. I'm safe. Carry on.
Yes.
If not, I'll tell my story and then you can think about it. So
yeah, you go.
You were discussing about how it can be hard to sort of get started with things, and I spoke with James yesterday, and James looked into ecological dynamics.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, and he said he got confused. There's no starting point. I was like, I know.
I had this experience. So I started doing a little bit on complexity theory and self-organize, and it was really interesting. I watched the same video that you had in your sources, and I took that source myself. And I was like, I love how there isn't a step-by-step. I looked up information processing because I was writing a post about the difference and wanted to start talking about that in where, and I'm like, oh, this is really simple and I hate it. Well, simple. This is so like it's been structured. It's 1, 2, 3, and then you look at complexity theory, ecological dynamic, and that kind of post Newtonian
it's complex
idea, huh?
It's complex.
And you look at it and you're like, it's complex. And I just laughed. I went, well, that kind of sums up complexity theory in a nutshell. It's not as easy to explain as information goes in, we do funky things with it, and it comes out the other side. And then I'm like, how do I put that into less than 4,000? There's 4,000 characters I have on Facebook. And I'm like, this isn't going to happen. This is actually not going to happen. And if it does happen, no one's going to bloody read it. I mean, but yeah, it's like, it was really interesting trying to take these very complex topics and like trying to put them in buckets, because of course the act of putting them in buckets in itself is
constraining the environment, can lead to oversimplification,
which is making so many assumptions come out. Like, oh no, there they go. No.
Now you understand why when I'm talking about some of this stuff at the start you were like, yeah, but just explain. I'm like, I can't explain this thing without you knowing what this thing is, but you can't explain this thing without that thing being grasped. And you just end up saying, right, layers. I need to explain everything at once, but I can't.
Yeah, because we would just never do anything. It's like, it's been really interesting.
And that's James's experience. James was like, I tried reading some stuff, but it's all in sport and it goes well over my head, and I don't understand this term, that term, and I'm like, yes, I know. I mean, that's what I want to try and do. Is like, how do I explain this thing? Which is, I can say this I was on the podcast, but I was saying to John a minute ago, I don't know whether I want to do like 10, 20-minute videos explaining something fairly niche, or spend an hour and a half doing a deep dive on one argument. Because that's essentially an academic paper. An academic paper is just one argument. I could easily do that. I could easily write for hours and hours and hours. But it's like, which one would be the story that is told through a YouTube video? And I have no idea, because how in the world do you tell a story about dynamical systems theory without boring the hell out of people? I mean, I like this stuff and I get bored sometimes listening to people talk about it. Unless there's like fun things in there.
When I first started, it was the sport, because everything's in sport. And
that's where all education seems to start from.
Yeah. And so in high performance, isn't it? It's getting the most out of this thing we have. I
mean, even when you look at like driving cars, the performance is at F1. That's where all the innovation is coming from. It's coming from F1, the high performance driving. And then they bring it down into the general population cars eventually when they know it works. And when you look at people and learning, high performance people are typically in sport, high performance sport.
But this is the thing that rubs me the wrong way. And this is something that I've been writing about and getting my ideas down for, hence why I've been an Obsidian. Hooray. It was all of the stuff that's in the business world is, from my understanding, almost entirely outdated. It's I know that's a little bit generalized and not quite specific enough, but like, yes, there is value in the older stuff, but there is everything over here, the newer stuff that's happening in the sport world is like that is accurate of my experience.
I think that's, to me, that's a little bit different. Like when you said it's like old and outdated, I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, but how many years are we talking? Because academia is like inherently outdated, because as soon as something is published, it's taken 3 years for the thing to go through the whole process.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I mean outdated to a degree where it's
you're talking like 70, 80 years outdated.
I'm talking 70, 80 years outdated, because that's the thing that I'm like, I now just watch people, and there are posts that I'm seeing right now around, I'm just happy being chaotic and not organized and not this. And I'm like, you are organized. You are. You are self-organized. Stop saying you're not organized, because it's not true.
I love that. Self-organized. I love the word.
You are self-organizing yourself. There's a business coach that I follow, and her entire business is literally a dynamical system. She is self-organized, all the little pieces, and put it together. And I'm like, yes, that is valuable. Everyone puts different value. Perception. But to me, that is the most valuable that I've ever had, most value from people I've ever had. And so for me, I'm interested in like exploring that more, because everyone talks, oh, I'm just very disorganized and everything's a bit chaotic. I'm like, okay, why is that a problem? Tell me why that's wrong. Tell me why you don't like that first.
That is the most academic question I think I've heard you ask.
Asking a lot of them recently. Why? Just why? Because you're saying why that's a problem. That you say you're acting as if that's a problem. Why is it a problem? And
you're literally explaining my video right now.
You're welcome. So you said it. That's the thing. I just find it fascinating that people, like, instead of being organized by a thing, whether that be an app, a tool, or a solution, or whether it be, I don't understand what people are organizing themselves, projects, and what everybody tells them to do in the business world. It's like
insert buzzwords.
Yeah, insert buzzwords. It's like just watch yourself, because it happens.
So this is part of the script I was writing, like just before we got on the call.
The ironic thing is I haven't read that one.
Well, no, because I was literally just writing it. Yeah, I'm on draft 3, draft 2, and then the first draft of this one of like different scripts. I'm like, there's so much I want to say. I'm like, do I do it
Oh,
10-minute, hour long? Like, yeah.
yeah,
Anyway,
that's something that I've experienced now. So I'm starting to slowly going through my backlog of like my inbox slowly, and I'm like, oh, that's another topic I want to talk about. Oh, that's another topic I want to talk about. Oh, that's another topic I was. And at first, like my brain was, okay, I'm going to have 5 projects because that's the limit that I can cope with. And then and now I'm just realizing, going, oh, that's thinking from a information processing like.
you're boxing the things down.
I'm boxing the things and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm not going to do that no more. I don't want to do that. I have so many things that I want to work on. And I have so few projects in when you compare it to yourself. But like I have way more projects now that I have just started creating. And I'm not naming them beautifully. And I know I've seen yours and I'm like, cool, I'm happy with that. And I've now started just when I'm going through some of my sources that I have, I'm like, oh, that is a really interesting thing that I want to talk about. Oh, that's a really interesting thing I want to talk. Wow. Oh, that's a really interesting thing I want to talk about. Oh, that's a really interesting thing I want to talk about. And I'm just now creating them.
Yeah.
With very little like.
Yeah. So for those listening, I was just highlighting my dashboard. So I have 18 other ideas, 24 curious ideas, 28 noodling ideas, 2 active projects, 3 pause projects, 3 high priority projects, 16 interesting projects. And then I have a few in my head that I know are going to be related to some of these as well. So that's not even the end. And I'm like, damn, I got a lot to say. And I have an opinion. And this is where I'm at now with I say the new channel, but the channel that's been my second channel that I haven't actually done any public videos on for a while, because I just sort of like, I killed the public videos because all the stuff that goes on there is all the private stuff for the course and for other email videos I send to people. But I'm like, okay, I have an opinion and I want to share my opinion rather than just giving people the technical and tactical advice of tools. But as soon as you share your opinion, you now have an opinion publicly available that people will use. And I'm not scared of that. I'm actually excited by that. But as soon as I share that opinion, it's like I can now be questioned more, if that makes sense. And it's not me wanting to be right, because I'm not right. I have an opinion, I have evidence to support my opinion, and that's what I want to do, share an opinion about learning and education and blah, blah, blah. But when you get the rebuttals, most of the time, from what I've experienced currently as I guess you could say a content creator, I would call myself a content creator. That's what I told my accountant anyway. Yeah. Most of the rebuttals that I've heard are very shallow and they don't think things through because they're lazy. It's the type of audience that I think I'm exposing myself to at the moment, which is maybe actually a reason to do an hour-long video rather than a 10-minute. So you actually gain people that think rather than... Anyway, I'm going on a side tangent. The comments are so shallow that I'm like, I need to have a somewhat succinct argument point that I can make. I can either just go to this timestamp or go to this video to explain the argument, because that's how I feel when I'm looking at people like Andrew Wilson is a perfect example at the moment in the ED space, ecological dynamic space. And he's been not necessarily fighting on Twitter, but he certainly had a lot of objections to his views on Twitter from things that he's saying about coaching. To give people context, essentially there are drills shared all the time in the coaching field, like people kicking a ball against a wall, people playing tennis against the wall. And from an ecological perspective, you're like, well, that's not helping. If anything, it might actually be harming, because you're learning I'm trying to avoid jargon here, but you're doing the skill, the action, the perception, the action loop. You're doing the skill in a context that isn't true to what you're actually going to do it in. Like, you're never going to hit a ball that high tennis, for example, on a wall, you're never going to hit it that high on an actual court, because it would either go off the court or miles over the line, or it just dip in front of the opponent that's going to smash that, you lose a point. But the wall, yeah, you can do that fine. It's easy. So he's been like hitting a lot of backlash, and he doesn't have a repository of arguments where he can be like, this is my point, go over there. And that's what I want to try and do, but I don't have that repository right now, and I'm trying to start it. I'm like, where the world do I start?
That is exactly my experience. Literally was yesterday when I was writing. So someone made one of the common posts around, like, a coach in the neurodiverse space made a comment around, you don't have to be organized, it doesn't fit for me, organization is not needed. And I'm like,
wet fish.
I get what you're saying, but you are organized. And I wish people would stop saying that. You are self-organized. It's so much, because that's the thing. It's like, if you accept you are unorganized, which I have a feeling that actually what you've been saying about ADHD and autism the entire time is kind of related to this. My brain's gone, oh, that might be a connection. It's like, you're assuming you're unable to do something, so you don't look into how to do it. You've made that assumption that you can't do something, so you won't try. And you won't look at it from that perspective. You just think, well, I'm disorganized. Well, if you assume you are unable to do something, you'll never be able to move forward with that, and you will find yourself stuck. If you're happy to be there, that's fine. I don't give a shit. But if you're wanting to improve and develop and continue moving forward as a human being, wouldn't you want to do that?
I agree.
And so that for me is like, yeah, it's just
this point here, I think, reigns true in so many. I love this quote. It's from John Sweller, who's the person that pushed cognitive load theory, and it's where a lot of cognitive psychology, information processing, it's where a lot of it comes from. And neurodiverse specifically use working memory a lot of the time as the crutch to their argument, because they have a shorter working memory, so it's hard to organize information in their head. Here, this is the person that they are citing as the answer to the problem of working memory, essentially. And he said, if a student cannot organize information, it is more likely that they suffer from the complexity of the particular information they are dealing with, rather than ignorance of how to organize. Essentially saying they know how to organize stuff, which in ED we would argue is self-organization. What they struggle with is how complex the information is. So what he's saying is, this person doesn't understand the information they're trying to organize. Not they don't know how to organize. And the understanding then comes with learning.
Which for me is exactly, as I've been exploring more and more of complexity theory. I'm going to call it complexity theory because that kind of self-encompasses quite a lot of what I've been personally saying, although it is ED2. It's
technically dynamical systems theory, because complexity theory is a part of, but
but and like, as I've been more exploring and learning this, I'm like, oh, that's why this happens. Oh, and noticing what I'm doing naturally, and then being able to harness what I do naturally more effectively. And by effectively, it just means bringing bloody awareness to it, understanding that that's how it works, and then continuing to do that because I know what's working, because I can see what's working, because I'm actually getting more bloody organized in the traditional term.
And bringing that back to, I was going to say, bringing that back to the schools, that's why when you look at like your kids going into specialist schools, or whatever words you want to put on there, I don't like the whole like special needs or special education or whatever special or needs, or I don't like it, because everyone needs something different. Everyone can organize stuff, but everyone needs to organize information in a different way that suits them in their environment.
Which even from my experience of the specialist setting, or whatever you want to call it, the academy that we looked at.
Oh, there's another word. Academy.
Yeah, I know.
What does that mean?
I know. But like, looking at that school, and I'm like, right, you get it. You just get it. You like, I am very fascinated to go to the mainstream school for seeing what that looks like, because we've been invited, and oh heck, I'm going, because I would be really fascinated to see the difference. Because yes,
I just thought, I have no idea how this would work, if it could work. But I'm thinking YouTubers obviously go to schools, they do things, they do like physical, real world things. What I'd love to be able to do is question teachers of a school, head teachers of a school, ask them their philosophy, ask them why they teach the way they do, how they teach, etc., and then actually go into lessons and see if that's what they do. Because I am willing to bet that what they think they do and what they actually do are different things. And I don't think many teachers are aware of that. And if they are aware of that, they don't talk about the problems enough for them to be solved. Otherwise, they would be solved. And I know from a coach's perspective, most coaches think they are doing X, Y, Z, but they actually don't, because they don't really know what it looks like in practice. They can talk about it in theory, but not know what it looks like in practice. And from what you're saying with the academy that you've looked at, is they know what it looks like in practice.
It was just, I've never experienced anything so different as such, which is crazy considering like the way that the head teacher communicated and had us all together and allowed us to ask questions in like multiple different forms. It wasn't just sit down, shut up, listen. It was sit down, introducing everything, understanding the philosophy of practice of the school, the community, the communication, and how they work. And I'm like, great, I now have an understanding of your context. Okay. Then we got shown around the whole place in 3 different groups. So we are in the environment of the classes that they potentially would be in. And what I love is they've split us off into 3 different groups, individual groups, and they are watching what the kids do. And then they are putting people together that would fit well. They are crafting an environment so that an actual learning environment that would fit. And I'm just like, I love this. I love every minute. I love everything you're doing right now. Yes, I'm exceptionally biased and excited, but like you could just see it. You can see that they care, and the way that the the head teacher she communicated when there was, is there any more questions? And there were kids raising their hands and asking questions, including my little one. And she literally went, "Do we have homework?" Like I heard that in high school we get much, much, much more homework and homework every day. And it was really interesting because the head teacher answered the question at 2 separate levels as such. It was at a level that a child would understand without being patronizing, without being like, oh, you don't know nothing, but also talking to us as the adults in the room
That supposedly know more.
who supposedly know more when really we don't. And it was really interesting to see that it was carefully considered. And you could tell. And every single teacher there, it felt like that they got it. Now, of course, this is just one environment that we're in. It's the introduction. They're trying to make sure that people like the school, blah, blah, blah. Well aware of all of that. And we're going to see what happens over the next. But one thing I really loved is how they're fostering curiosity right at the beginning. Because one of the kids and mine asked 2 separate questions, which the teachers didn't know the answers to about the school. And so they have assigned one of the teachers that are specifically student support that are designed to work with us to go and find out the answer. My daughter's question, how many toilets are in the school? Because there was a lot of toilets in the school. And the teacher was like, you know what? I don't actually know, but we're going to go and find out for you. And I will email your dad to find out, to tell you the answer. It's like fostering curiosity right there with something so mundane and uninteresting. Another kid asked about, like, I really like these inspector books. How many books do you have? And they're like, I don't actually know, but I'm going to send this teacher to go and have a look, and then I'm going to let them email you. And I'm like, that is fostering curiosity. You bloody get it. Ah!
It's not the, oh, we can find that out. It's the, they actually go and find out. They don't just say it to shut the kid up, which is what a lot of teachers do at schools, because they just don't have the time to count all books or go to all the toilets. It's not high on their priority, but I wouldn't say it should be high on their priority. I'm just saying it should be higher than I think it is put. And when I was talking about parents potentially knowing more, the reason I say that is because a lot of parents think they know, but they really don't. because a lot of parents use their experience at their own schools and their own experience in learning and living life, which is understandable, everyone does it, but they don't know how learning works, how education works, how other people learn. Like when you say pedagogy to parents, I mean, you could say pedagogy to a lot of people and they wouldn't understand it, even if they're in the field. Study YouTube. If you say pedagogy to parents, they won't know what that is. But they're arguing a lot of the time for their kids' learning, which is pedagogy. So they're making an argument for something that they don't even know the name of the field they're arguing in, which I understand why they're doing it. They want to have good experiences for their kids. They want their kids to learn, etc., etc. Yes, intentions are great. But again, if you don't have a base for your argument, you're kind of just getting in the way. And I know it's hard to say, and it's harsh to say, and I know some people may object against it, but a lot of the time the parents get in the way of learning. They don't help it, even with the best intentions.
This is something that I've been really hyper aware of for my two, because I have my biases against education. I have my biases for it. I am more interested in self-directed learning, but I also know the limits of my capacity to be able to lead that, because I'm still figuring it out myself.
And I mean, there's not a best way to learn, because everyone learns differently at different times and different experiences. Obviously, that's complexity theory and dynamical systems theory in a nutshell. So sometimes you need a worked example to understand really what's going on, the complexity of what's going on, so you can pull it apart and put it back together again. Like that is helpful, that is beneficial, and that often is given by someone. Hey, here's the answer. Great, thanks. But it's what you do with the answer next that, to me, is the learning part, because you can give someone a toy and be like, there you go play with that. But some of them will pull it apart and be like, how does this work? Others will throw it at the wall and get bored. Others will just forget it's there. Some people will just play with it and come up with their own world about what the toy is. Everyone's drastically different, and that's very hard to foster in an environment that is as constrained as schools are.
Yeah.
Because you can't, I mean, multiple intelligences, the book talks about, obviously, multiple intelligences and how people lean one way or another, whether it's logically minded, physically minded, artistically inclined, those sorts of things. And they have classrooms built for the different types of intelligences. So some people will go towards the material because they want to know what material something's built with. Other people will look at like an abacus or a calculator because they want to do the numbers. Like some people want to figure things out. Other people just want to mess around and just make a mess with paints and who knows what. Everyone's interests are going to be different at different times. But having that environment in every classroom in school, that's a lot of effort. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of cleanup as well. So it's a big struggle, especially in schools. How we move forwards with that, I think, has to come from the top.
Yeah, and sadly, it's too much work.
I wouldn't say it's too much work. I just don't think there's a good answer at the moment. Because, I mean, I'm going to argue cognitive psychology gets in the way, but I think the assumptions from cognitive science in general, the assumptions get in the way of moving forwards in a lot of areas, because people's philosophy, their ideology is built on, oh, you have a working memory and you need to retain this information and you need to learn how to do math and blah, blah, blah. Yep. Yes, great, but it's not as I can do this in this context, I can now do it in that one. It doesn't work like that.
I mean, my two are complete and utter lived examples of that. My kids have very little danger perception. But I asked them about road safety. They can recite it off by heart. Recite it off by heart, because that's what they've been taught to do. But when it comes to the practicalities of it, it goes out the window the moment something is. Once another input comes into their environment, they're like, that's it, gone, bye. They don't have that link.
Making the relation between theory and practice is difficult unless you're in the practice. And this is where practitioners and scientists need to communicate, because scientists can't do practice if they're going to be in the science, but then practitioners can't be in the science if they're going to do practice. So there needs to be people in the middle that do a bit of practice, a bit of science, speak with the other scientists and speak with the other practitioners to try and bring some communication in there. And at the moment, inside of education, we don't have that. You have the academics, you have the teachers, but there are very, very, very few so learner communicators, like educational communicators, or educational science communicators, I guess, to be more specific. They don't. I'm trying to be that, but I'm trying to find other people that do it to model off of them. I could argue I found a lot, but what I've really found is academic communicators or practitioner experience communicators. Like, this is what I was like teaching XYZ. This is how I taught in this school, or this is the academia that I've been researching, and these are the results that we've found. It's very hard to find people in the middle that are actually talking about it, because the people that are doing it don't have time to talk about it because they're trying to balance two drastically different worlds of theory and practice and bring it together. Andrew Wilson is one example that comes to mind. He is in the science, he's in the theory, and he's putting the theory in practice inside of a professional sport team, Southampton, with PhD students. He doesn't have time to have a YouTube channel. He doesn't have time to run a podcast. He doesn't have, I mean, he has a blog, but the blog it's very shallow because he doesn't have enough time to really write, because he writes in science. So I'm like, okay, essentially he needs someone to tell his story. But how in the world do you tell that story without talking to him? You can't. You have to talk to him to get the views, but then you, as the person communicating, need to understand the theory, need to grasp where the practice comes from. And that, to me, is the problem with educational science at the moment. There's no good way to communicate it. A lot of people feel it, like they feel they know what's good. And when you look at a lot of creators online, Jazza is a good example from the art industry. He lives the educational science, but he has no idea what the words mean. He's a practitioner of learning. And you look at all the, like, Mike Boyd and the other Mike that does the learning challenges, like, they live the practice of learning and they share the practice of learning through different fields. But how do you apply it to something that's not throwing a knife or building code? How do you apply that theory to something else? And that's where you need the theory of the practice and someone to communicate that in a way that makes sense to you, for you to apply it. And that's what I want to try and do. That's what I'm trying to find other people that do, but it's difficult. Education is hard.
Yeah.
It's complicated, and there isn't an easy answer. But people try and find the easy answers, which is where the frameworks and the tactics and the tips, tricks, and hacks bullshit comes in, because they try and simplify something that isn't simple.
Yeah, I'm trying to do the same in business, but it's very fun and complicated.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I could argue with myself. I've been procrastinating about putting out these educational science videos. Obviously, I did some of the research, heavy ones, but again, that's just me talking about academia, which is fun for me, but not really applicable to most general people. It's like finding a way to tell that story is difficult because it is so essayist.
It's dense. It's very dense.
3 Blue 1 Brown, right? It's a channel that talks about math, very complicated math. But because it's math, there can be, okay, this means this, which means this, which leads to this. I have this could mean any of these things, and this, which could mean any of those things. And you can interpret any of those things and any of these things in lots of different ways, which could lead to a variety of things over there. How in the world do you explain that? I don't have an answer yet.
No, that was my experience yesterday while writing the post that I was writing. I'm like, okay, cool. I have so many things I need to try and explain here.
I'm tempted to talk to some of the philosophical creators and be like, how? Just how? I understand the output, but as someone that's trying to create it, trying to do the practice, how do you go from, I have 100 resources, I have thousands of words of research, I have thousands of hours of practice, I have thousands of hours of examples in practice, and I have millions of stories I could create. How do you pick one? How do you refine one? How do you explain that thing in a video that's linear? How? And don't say, oh, you need a journey from A to B. You need a part A, part
No,
B, part
what you need,
three-act
what you need,
structure.
what you need, Danny. Come on. Well, let me tell you. Let me coach you in this. I
Yeah.
laugh when I say this. I'm laughing here. You just need to do what I say and follow a Notion template. You're welcome. I'm a coach now.
How much are you charging for the template?
Well, I've got all of my years of experience, and it is very high value, so about 1,500.
Wait. No, but how nice does it look though?
It is incredibly beautiful. I mean, you could recreate it in about 2 minutes, but you know, I put a lot of work.
It's in a nice box.
Yeah,
Nice boxed image
yeah,
with a great packaging at the front.
yeah, yeah. And it looks as if it's an actual app itself, when really it's not. I have 3D box art, of course, because it's a package, and because you see value as an actual item, even though it's not an item, it's a fucking template. But still, it has a box, and it's in it, and you know what it's called? Academic Creator OS.
For anyone that doesn't understand the sarcasm, we are taking the piss. Oh my word, yes. Oh, and if I do get this template, right, it will revolutionize my life.
Yeah, revolutionized everything.
It would change my life forever.
You'll earn millions.
Yeah, I'll be able to replicate what you do.
Oh yeah, which I don't actually do because I don't even use it. But you will, and you will get what you want. I mean, mine's completely different now.
Yeah. Of course, you changed it, what, 2 days after you made it? Or you forgot you made it and it's just somewhere in your vault somewhere? Sorry,
yeah,
the workspace.
no, yeah, that's that. Yeah.
Calling out almost like 90% of Notion creators.
Including me.
Yeah, including past myself in the past. Yeah, it's storytelling is difficult. Storytelling for something that doesn't have an obvious story is even harder. And I'm going to say this, it's not just me. I asked James like how he would do this, and he was like, don't really know. Like, I mean, obviously he's not in the same situation as me. He doesn't know the stories. But when I'm talking about different things, because obviously I talk out loud when I'm thinking, and sometimes in the office it's like, oh, that's interesting, and I'm like, yeah, but why? Like I'm saying something in my head that's obvious, and he's picking something out. I'm like, yeah, but why is that interesting? That's just obvious, but it's not obvious, and that's where I'm stuck in my head. I'm like, I need to tell a story that to me is so obvious and so basic, but to everyone else, it's like, oh my god, this is revolutionary. Like when I said to him,
That has been my experience. So I had a podcasting thing where I did loads of podcasts, and everyone was saying that my ideas were revolutionary, and I'm just sat there going, why? They're not. They're boring. They're obvious. And I think that's what people need, is the obvious parts, because we are just not obvious.
we're obvious to us,
We're
but
obvious to us,
outside of our system, in the environment, it's not organized in the same way.
or organized or even existing in that environment.
Oh, it does. Everything does.
Cool.
Take time out of it as a linear thing. It always exists.
Oh yeah, it's a good. Ooh, love that.
Come on, John. You've seen the space.
I have.
You've seen the space wall. Actually, it's behind me. You can see it. I'm gonna have
I
to
can
try
see the space wall.
Yeah, there. That's so weird because it's there. Like it's
Yeah, and to me, I'm also looking at the mirror behind you, so you're pointing the wrong way.
Yeah, I'm like it's there. There. Yeah. Well, it's there looking at me, and it's there looking at the mirror, but it's neither of those because it's actually over there. Yeah. I need it. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, I'm cool. Anyway, complete side. Anyone listening is like, what the fuck is going on? I actually, side note, I said to James, I was like, yeah, this podcast is literally just two guys talking. Yeah, with no real plan. They sort of just turn up and talk, and he was like, they're the best ones. If you say so. And James, if you're listening, hi. Carry on, John.
Hi.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to the educational system, going back to what we're saying to start with, and talking about educational content, do you think? Actually, no, that's a poor question. I was going to. How do you think content creators as educators should move forwards when they learn about educational science, etc., etc.? You know my views already on a lot of the content creators not creating sources, not having good arguments, and pushing misinformation.
I don't think a lot of the current content creators are educators.
Enough.
Enough.
Yeah, I would add enough, because they are educated. Everyone's educated.
No, as in they're educators, as in, if you know what I mean. They may have their own education, but they aren't educating others. They're like, even though they are, but they're not.
I was going to say, like, you're going to have to narrow down on that, because their intention might not
is
be
to
education.
educate. Yeah.
Their intention might not be to educate.
Is to create and to entertain.
I think my issue is when their intention is to educate,
but they only entertain.
Yeah. However, even if their intention is not to educate, they are still educating. And that's what's complicated about content creation.
That's kind of where my brain is like, I'm like, yes, and yes, no, but yes.
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, that question is not really one that even has an answer. The opinion that I have is not backed. Because
you don't have a formulated opinion yet.
I don't have a formulated opinion with evidence, which is why I'm aware of that. And I think a lot of creators have that same issue, but just go anyway.
So this to me is how I would try and tackle this. Is I see content creators as academics. I see them the same, except academics have standards to uphold, and they have rules and guidelines they need to follow. Content creators don't have standards that they need to uphold, and they don't have rules and guidelines they need to follow. Academia obviously has its issues, and there are lots of them. Content creation also has their issues and lots of them. But what they both do is they share an opinion, they share information with other people to create or continue a conversation. Content creators don't create a conversation. They don't add to a conversation. They throw something at a wall and see if it sticks.
It's virality. That's the idea. It's like if they get viral, then they get popular. And like for me, as I suppose, I still don't align with the content creator name, but I do create content or have done in the past. And
you wouldn't identify as a content creator.
No. And so for me, whenever I'm creating something, and especially now that I have started to build a body of actual, factual opinion, research, and actual information that can back what I'm saying, it's becoming, in fact, in some respects, it's becoming easier to come up with content, and also harder to action that content.
Yeah,
because I started writing something in my head and just blurt out onto the page, and then I'm like, okay, cool, but I want to like take, because these concepts are freaking ridiculous, and try and help and kind of support like the assumptions that are being made by what I'm saying. So I put it into Obsidian, started looking around, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a bit of that's interesting. And then I'm like, shit, this is not a social media post anymore.
That's the problem with those that do have deep knowledge of whatever it is. When you have expertise, which is why a lot of expertise or experts are,
How am I going to make a TikTok about complexity theory? Like,
oh, that's easy. That's easy. But making it deep, nah, that's impossible.
mm.
Because
Here's the thing, got
you're constrained by the time.
complexity theory. It's fun, it's exciting, and there you go. Goodbye. That's what I might as well say.
I mean, when you've got a constraint such as time, you'd need to use analogies and heuristics for people to grasp onto, which is fine, is easy, but then you're like, is it misinformation or is it? And
Yeah,
you need to be,
that's the bit. It's like
you'd
when I
need to be
tried.
careful with the words and the analogies you use. As long as it's for shallow information, it doesn't really matter, because it is so shallow that you haven't said this is, or you haven't given an answer. You've just explained a thing. And an explainer is, in my view, better than an answer to something, which is why people like Johnny Harris, when they do explainer videos, I think they're useful, even if they're factually incorrect. They're useful because they explain a perspective of the problem. I mean, Stack as well. I assume I've said that right. I don't know. The channel name is just K's and G's and Y's in the middle of things. Like, come on. But yeah, Stack, their channel, they share an opinion. They have a bias. And if you're going to have a voice anywhere, you need to have an opposing opinion, an opposing perspective. You need to have a conversation somewhere. But unfortunately, the way that social media currently works is one voice will always be louder than another. And I was watching a video essay before we got on the call, and the person was saying that if you've got a big creator like Kershak that has a view on, say, addiction, and you have another smaller creator that has the evidence and has an alternative opinion, that smaller creator is not going to be seen unless the bigger creator shares it or it's pushed in some way by an audience that is looking for an alternative. Unless that creator pushes a narrative and says they are wrong, but as soon as you say they're wrong, it's implying you're right, which is bringing up a barrier. And now it's no longer a conversation. Now it is I am on their side or I am on their side. Like you're picking sides.
And that's something that one of the things that I've been deciding to do is to move my, like, I don't think I'll call it niching because it is, but it's not. Like, my focus has moved into neurodivergent or neurodiverse business owners. And the reason why is because when I actually have conversations with the individuals who are neurodiverse, who are autistic, who are ADHD or ADHD or whatever you want to bloody call it, all those words, they like nuance. I've noticed a lot of the people I speak to actually enjoy nuance. Now, that is not a characteristic of people who are neurodiverse, but they can see things different. They don't assume.
That is where I would personally, I don't disagree with the statement, but I disagree with the assumption when it comes to the characteristics of those that are neurodiverse. Because when you look at those people that are neurodiverse, because of however you've categorized them, diagnosis, social construction, those people typically, because of the construct we've created socially, think in a way that doesn't suit the norm that other people see, which means they are often challenging other people. They are often challenging and being critical. And in order to be critical of other people, you need to bring out information to argue against, i.e. nuance.
Yeah.
So I would say that an attribute, or an inherent attribute of those that are typically seen as neurodiverse want the nuance because they recognize that we're not all the same.
Yeah.
So I think it's a characteristic that they look for because they see it already.
Yeah, I think that is what I'm trying to say in much better explanations. Yes. Yeah,
that I've articulated it.
You articulated it in a much more professional way. Thank you very much. But yeah, exactly that. Because that's my experience. I read stuff and go, wait, what? But
this gets to the root as to one of my issues with the whole neurodiverse movement thing and all the other arguments we've made before. more people, because of the way education currently works online, are getting nuanced. They have an opinion, multiple identities appearing, multiple
Getting
opinions being
nuanced.
shared. Yeah, there is far more nuance in the world now, and it's getting very complicated to manage. And I'm going to call them out here that old people, sorry, don't like nuance. They don't like when you say, well, it depends. And I'm not sure about that, because they're so ingrained in the categories that they've grown up with. This is how you do work. This is how you live life. Go to 9-5 job, blah, blah, blah. This is step-by-step process. So many people now don't like the step-by-step process because they recognize there are other things. They recognize there's nuance. And what is that? That's diverse from the traditional view. Now you're all neurodiverse. No, you're not. You just recognize there's nuance in the world. And to me, the explosion of neurodiversion is actually the explosion of nuance in conversation. It's the explosion of autonomy of thought. That's the way I see it, because most people that are neurodiverse have their own perspective. They have their own view. They have a voice that they want to share, which previously didn't happen because freedom of speech was an issue. Obviously, all the political issues, slavery issues, blah, blah, blah. There's so many things that have constrained people in the past that you're in that box, you're in that box. When we get rid of the boxes, what happens? We get more opinions. And we have more opinions, we have more nuance, we have more perspectives. And for whatever reason, the human population is like, oh, now we have loads of people's different opinions, but we can't categorize all these different opinions. Oh, wait, yes, we can. We call them neurodiverse. Sorry, but that's how I see it.
I don't disagree.
Good.
like I'm just like, yeah. You're not.
I mean, I don't want to say it's what older people are trying to do, but when you look at like the institutions and the structures, they're like, oh, we have these 10 people that are different. They have different views, different perspectives. They're adding nuance, and it depends. We don't know how to deal with them. They have special needs, or they have needs that we can't meet, or they are neurodiverse. They're different from us. So you just box them away like you did with, I mean, I don't want to become a Gary Lineker here and say something that's a little bit, did you hear about that?
Oh, I heard about that. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say it's on the news, BBC.
I don't follow sport, but I've only heard about that.
Yeah. For those unfamiliar that are outside of the UK, essentially Gary Lineker, the person that hosts Match of the Day, which is like the biggest sporting program in the UK, it's about football, obviously. He's a BBC news presenter. He associated the government's policy, the wording specifically of the government policy, to Germany in the 30s, i.e. World War. And he was saying that it's the same. Now, I'm not saying that what people are doing now by boxing people into the neurodivergent box is the same as slavery or the same as any other marginalized group, but it does represent things that are very, very similar. You're disregarding their opinions.
When you have these nuanced conversations, because I sorry to just get excited and enjoy, like that is when so I went to a retreat a while ago, and there are a lot of people who identify as neurodiverse, and there were people in there who didn't identify as neurodiverse but left going, oh wait, yeah, no, that makes sense. And there was a lot of that like kindredship of like people realizing construct, obviously. And what some of the nuanced discussions we were having were exactly like that, of like we like, for me, the identity of neurodiverse fits. I get it, because it's the quickest, easiest way of explaining that how I work is slightly different to the assumptions that people make. And that is my use of that term. And so and then when you look at that, people are like, oh, well, then there are assumptions being made. Well, yeah, of course there are assumptions being made. And this is a discussion I had with my same friend who talked about the school. It's like, well, they just assume you're going to be this type of person. So she said, are they? Are they? Because you're assuming that they're assuming. And so your assumptions will make them assume it. And so it was really interesting of like, and when we had the nuanced discussions, a lot of the putting people into the neurodiverse bubble is like, and the reason why people do it to themselves is because of like, I can't think of the word right now, but it is putting us to the side. That's the argument of like putting us to the side, but we're also partly doing it ourselves. because we're assuming
Segregating? Is that the word you're thinking of?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that's quite the word, but it is very
Pulling
much
apart,
like,
segregating, categorizing,
I can't think
differentiating.
of the word. It's a word that people use a lot when it comes to like, yeah, I
Yeah.
can't think of the word right now. I'll remember it and eventually as soon as we stop talking about it.
Google synonyms.
Yeah. It's like the assumption being made is we are incapable.
Mm.
And that assumption is being made a lot to a lot of people. And also by ourselves that we are incapable.
What I
Because of the
think,
box we've been put in the societal construct of what neurodiversity is being less than or more than. And that's, to simplify quite grossly. I realize my simplification of this, but
that's what
yeah,
people do.
yeah,
That's exactly what people, and I think because people have categorized themselves and they champion the ADHD, they champion the neurodiverse, what they're doing is they're championing their own segregation, their own whatever it is over there. But as soon as you have a group of people over there, you can then categorize everyone in that group as that thing, that category.
which is the kind of thing we'd like from
Which is
my
exactly what we've tried to avoid in the years. Like, why
that's exactly what
why are you
I
building
try
what
to.
you've just tried to pull apart?
Yeah, exactly. And that is the weird part of what we do.
I'm just so confused. Like, what, as I said, like, when you box people, it's easy to categorize them, and that's what we've been doing in history. That's what we do. Excuse me, as humans, and archetypes. We love to add archetypes on things and psychological characteristics of this type of person. Yeah, but you change the context, you change the characteristics, the archetypes, the tendencies. And again, this is coming
It's
back
all
to
it's basically here's my conclusion. It's all cognitive theory's fault.
cognitive theory or cognitive science.
Cognitive science fault.
Okay. I think it's humans' intuition to follow the easy answer.
Yeah, I know.
Which is cognitive science.
Exactly.
But I don't want to blame cognitive science because obviously it's done a lot of good.
It does. It
has got a lot of good. But yeah, I think
for people who don't understand the British sarcasm, that was British sarcasm. Yes. That was British science sarcasm. Even niche.
Wow, we're getting real niche here. Let's make jokes about the dichotomy between ecological dynamics and information processing using British humor. Right.
Uh-oh!
Yeah. We've now niched our audience down to 3.
Yeah. Well, there's another.
Well, yeah, James.
Oh, cool. Hi, James.
Yeah. I mean, if he's still even listening, he's probably like zoned out. It's like, these morons. I'm not listening to this shit. But yeah. But like I say, I think I understand why we categorize ourselves and why we want to be in a tribe, in a group. It's like primal. We want to be with a group of people. But why can't that group of people be the globe, be humanity? I mean, I know that's very wishy-washy.
It's too complicated.
But it's not.
No, it is.
I mean, I know you're just playing devil's advocate because as soon as I ask you a question, you'd be like, I don't know because I'm on your side.
Yeah.
But I can see some of the arguments people would make. It's just they are trying to simplify things, but in simplifying things, they've actually made it harder for themselves.
Yes. And that sums up my whole entire experience with self-organization. It's like being self-organized is too complicated because they try to simplify it down into the 1, 2, 3 steps and then screw it up completely for themselves and then make them feel like they're just disorganized and they're just I
know where you are now. When you said self-organization, I was like, sorry, there's a problem with it. What's the problem with it?
No one with it. It's just people think that they're not allowed to be self-organized. And I've been there.
Yeah.
Because the science that discusses this isn't spoken about because it's so not simple to explain, except when you think about it, it is actually simple. But it's not.
And this is why we talk about stuff on the podcast, because what we're doing is we're creating an environment that allows things to emerge with the addition of parts. And John is a part in this environment that has just added a bit of context. And I just came up with an idea about how I can actually explain this stuff.
You're welcome.
Yeah, like in my head, I was like, how do I explain? Obviously, I explained the issue earlier, but how do I explain ecological dynamics through a story? Well, I just pick a story.
Am I going to have to wait for the video?
Well, no, I just pick a story. I just need to pick a story to tell and tell it through the lens of ecological dynamics.
Yes.
I mean, I know it's obvious saying that now, but I can actually like visualize the story because, as we said before,
you could ask AI.
Fuck off.
Try it. It's funny.
I've tried. I tried so many times to get AI to give me any useful answers. It just throws out rubbish.
Have you tried Bing? Bing's marginally better.
Yeah, I use Bing. Obviously, I use Edge, so Bing's just there. It's actually really useful. Like when I search for stuff. Are you actually using Bing then?
I hate myself for it, but I'm actually using Bing. I started using ChatGPT. I'm getting sick and tired of it misunderstanding what I'm saying. So I went to Bing and Bing AI, and I'm like, okay, I'm at least getting answers. I still have to tell it off and make it use academic references more, which it still doesn't fully do 24/7. But
I don't even go into the chat. I don't even bother. Like when I search for something on Google, it's such a natural term. When I search for something on Bing, I get the result that I want. And most of the time, because of the way Bing works, you get good suggestive results anyway. You don't get the ads. You don't get the rubbish from Google anyway, which is why I prefer Bing. So I get the quick search results, and I can quickly browse through a couple of those things, open up a couple of those links, and see what the articles have to say, what the blogs have to say, or what the video has to say if it's linked in there. And then when I go back to the search, the AI has given me a summary of all the things I've just opened up. And oftentimes it links to some of the pages I've already opened up. And I'm like, this is so useful because I've done a very quick exploration, like a first search. I brought up a couple of points. And before I even need to go through and read those things, Bing AI has already summarized it for me. And some of these concepts are not simple. Like obviously, like productive procrastination is a fairly easy one. But I typed that in, and it came up with an explanation of what productive procrastination is. It came up with, obviously, Bing gave me two high profile examples of it with explanations in the actual search, so I didn't have to go into the article because it's an article preview, I think is what it's called, which is really nice. And then Bing just summarized it and then gave me more references. I'm like, and when I go back to Google, it's so painful. I'm like, I want something to tell me the answer. Or I need to see something apart from the 4 ads at the top of my friggin' search feed.
One thing that I really like, so I'm going to find the tweet because I'm like, it really does resonate. The way that people are using AI right now in the marketing world makes me sad because it's boring and it's just not actually very useful. Where is it?
Where you left it?
Yeah, probably.
Did you clip it to Zotero?
No, I hate clipping tweets to Zotero. It bugs me. I regret it. It's in my email, so I can get it from there. Which I could clip. Shut up. Yeah, there was a tweet that Rob Lennon had created. We should think less about how to use AI to automate creativity and start thinking more about how to use AI to foster it in ourselves and others. And that, I think, like for me, is how I use it.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's like getting feed. So one of the first things that I launched with ChatGPT Playground was one where it took my content and asked me questions. Because when you like in this environment, we kind of communicate together and there is something to work with. And AI isn't too bad at that, actually. Once you give it the right context, it can ask clever questions and stupid questions too. But sometimes those questions are really interesting and it triggers something else. And that is, for me, where I think the future of AI technology will be, and actually where it's valuable. Not writing the content for you, but more coming up with like being a thing to bounce off of, not as the final solution, the final output.
Yeah, I agree. I was just responding to James. We're talking about Skillshare as part of as part of education or not education, or yeah.
I did see a very interesting YouTube video about Skillshare.
Is the thumbnail red with Ali Marquez and Nathaniel Drew with red eyes? Yeah. That's the video he's just seen.
Yeah, I popped them on my feed and I'm like, oh, I remember Danny mentioning that. I'm gonna go watch it.
Yep. I've clicked it to my Zotero, so you could have found it if we had a group library, but we don't have a group library. That's a whole other conversation.
How would we work with a group library? Because we would both have two. The highlight. We'll have to discuss this anyway. Because like we could have a group library, but we highlight different things, and I sometimes use different colors.
Well, you'd have your own clip.
Oh yeah.
You'd have your own. The only issue that we might have is if you clip the same article as me,
which I would, quite possibly. Then again, would I? Because then we would just merge it, I suppose.
Well, you'd have a note on it. I'd have a note on it. So there's no issue there. The only issue would be the actual highlighting of the document. But I only use yellow. I use one highlight, bring them in, and then I work from there. So you could pick any of the other seven colors.
I could adapt mine to use a different color. It wouldn't bother me.
How many highlights do you use? All 8?
No. I use maybe 2 to 3. It depends on how dense the thing I'm reading. When I was reading, as I was reading through the coaching thing that I can't remember the name of right now. Your lecturer's coaching book.
Oh, Becoming a Sports Coach.
Becoming a sports coach. I had multiple highlights because I'm like, I want to read, like, learn more about this later. But I could just put that into the note instead rather than highlighting it. So I can easily use a different one.
All right. Okay. Well, it's 11:15. We've been yakking for a bit now. Anything else you want to add before you upload this podcast and last week's podcast?
Send me the right file this time. That's not like movie files, even though it says it uploads movie files.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, wait, no, I sent you an audio file. I'm sure I did.
A .mov.
MOV, yeah.
That's not an audio file.
Well, it's more of an audio file than MP3.
Yeah. But it doesn't like .mov. It wouldn't. I tried uploading it 4 times.
Oh, wow. Okay. Did you get it uploaded in the end, or?
No.
No. Oh, okay.
That's why it's on the list to be done next.
Yeah, I see it on the calendar. Oh, actually, before we close out, time 2.
Oh, can't wait. Let me have it.
Did you watch the interview I did with David?
I did.
Thoughts?
I'm more excited. I just had a nerdy little giggle to myself. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait. I just want it now. Let me have access, please. Give me. Do you have access yet?
No, because it's still in like pre-alpha. No, the waitlist is there, but it's in pre-alpha. I know what it could do, and I know some of the automations that they've already made, which David spoke about, some of them. Yeah, so it's like, I just want it. Like,
yeah.
Give me.
I want it now. Just give me all of it.
Being behind the scenes of the development team and knowing their future plans, I'm talking like end of this year future plans. I'm like, oh my God, I want to say stuff now, but I can't because obviously protection, privacy, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, oh, this is so cool. This is so cool. But yeah, I'm sitting here like holding my hands together. I'm like, I'm fine. I'm just told. But yeah, it's exciting. And I'm looking forward to time 2 coming. Obviously, it's on the waitlist, but it's going to come out month, maybe 2 months for like beta users and stuff. And with them hiring for the Morgan team as well, I brought on 2 new developers. Some of the Morgan bugs that have been sort of like annoying and things on the mobile app that are just annoying, that will get done because they've now
can't wait
time to actually work.
Because once they fix that, I can just recommend it
That's what I'm holding back on at the moment. I'm like, Morgan is so good on the computer, and it does such a great job of the basics on the phone. But if you add, it's like if you just had this little bit there or this thing over there, oh, it could be so good. It could be so good. Yeah, I'm just waiting for it, and then as soon as it does, I'm gonna do, because Marquez Brownlee did a video. It's clipped like 6 months ago, 7 months ago, of him talking. You may have seen the clip of him talking about, I think it was Daybridge at the time, becoming this new app. And I'm like, right, Marquez, I'm pitching you this app.
Yeah. I want everyone to be using Morgan because it's just something else.
Yeah, it's crazy. It
But
is.
they just need to get the mobile fixed. Because that would be that, like, if it weren't for the fact that I trust the developers, I would have left. Because
Right.
the mobile is so, it's not quite enough for me. But
Yeah.
because I know it's coming and because everything on desktop's amazing,
Does
I'm like,
Fantastical have a mobile app? I assume it does.
Does what, sorry?
Does Fantastical have a mobile app? Yeah, I thought so. I assume it's.
And their mobile app is fantastic, like obviously because they're massive, but it's Mac only, so that's why. And I primarily use Mac, so it didn't bother me. But honestly, the huge, massive increase in price, it's not worth it when I can get 80-90% of it with Morgan.
Yep. Yep. Oh. It's going to be a fun time in the future. But yeah, right. Let's close out this episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.